Hello and welcome to the Engerati studio at Itron Utility Week. I'm joined now by Russ, Vanos, who's VP of Sales and Marketing for Global Software and Smart Cities. And Russ, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And we're talking a little bit off air, and we've covered a lot of the themes that you guys have done such a great job of here, highlighting those. But one of the ones that I'd really wanted to talk to you about is the idea of smart cities, and to explore that through a narrative of starting off with, your thinking behind the need for a unifying technology platform and what that then enables you to do, and then we'll explore some of the other areas. But can you just tell us a little bit about your idea behind that unifying technology
Sure,
platform?
absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me here and letting me share some of these thoughts with you. When you look at the needs of the cities today and the changing environment we live in, and you look at all the pressures on the utilities themselves, there's a lot of things that we need to work on. And we're living in an era today where we're lucky to have a lot of technology advances, and we can solve. Technology exists to solve almost every issue around delivering electricity, gas, and water, and being efficient and being reliable. It also exists in terms of being able to integrate renewables into the grid, and we all know what a challenge that's going to be. Then you flip around and you look at our cities, and we all know that cities are getting more and more crowded. More people are moving there. There's more, demands on our cities as well, our communities, whether they're large or small. And all these problems can be solved by technology. And in fact, there's lots of places around the world where you have examples where they're doing things. They're doing them in silos. And so you build a platform or a communication network to do something around automating water and reducing water loss. And then you come around and you do it again around gas, or you do it with streetlights, for example. You end up building all these silos. So we step back and look at it and say, if we take advantage of the kinds of technology that's available today, and you build one unified platform, one network that can in fact communicate with electricity, gas, water meters, electricity, gas, water devices, leak detection, theft detection, looking for water pressure drops, looking for methane in the gas. You can build a network, build one network, not three. Just think about the utility who has to run that pole, run that real estate, take care of that real estate. And we're asking them for real estate, for devices to put up there to collect information from 3 different networks. That's a nightmare. And you look at those poles and it's not very aesthetically pleasing. We start throwing boxes on there. And then we're going to further that, because we're going to try to take care of building a network to provide local Wi-Fi. Or we're going to build a network to take care of streetlights, or to automate and advance parking systems perhaps. So if we can take advantage of the technology that exists today, build one network and solve all that needs, doesn't that make sense? And of course it does, and we can do that today. And so that's the notion behind, let's collect, or let's build one platform that can be foundational, that we can use to solve some very real grassroots kind of problems. And it starts with electricity, gas, and water, and they're not always very sexy kinds of things, but they're real. We have to deliver water, we have to deliver electricity, we want to bill for it, and it needs to be reliable. No one really thinks about their electricity until the lights don't come on, and then that's all they think about. So let's take care of those very kind of fundamental issues to, delivering a lifestyle to citizens and members of the community. And once we've built that, and once we eliminate waste and we become more efficient, let's take that and let's build the network and use the money that came out of that to go do some more, city services kinds of oriented things. And of course, in this network, one of the things we're going to be doing is we're collecting data today from electricity, gas, and water meters, but also from devices on the network. Tomorrow from, devices and sensors out in the community that may be looking at environmental, maybe looking at garbage, maybe looking at air quality, water quality, maybe looking at transportation. Let's take all that sensor data and let's bring that back to the head end. So we're talking about a platform at 2 areas.
So how much of this is, I understand the holistic view, and I can see pretty obviously where the benefits could come from. But are cities really starting to think like that? Because there's always that internal inertia. It's like when you're changing the DNA of a company and you're saying, okay, we're going to go from here to there. We're going to change the way we think about things, and that's really what you're saying, right? We've got to really change the way. So where do you see the inertia piece coming?
Right. That's a fabulous question, by the way. I think that cities are beginning to think that way, and I would say that if we can flip our thinking and we move it away from technology, because too often vendors like Itron go into the communities and we're all about trying to sell technology. If we can move into the community and have real live dialogue about what do we want the future to look like and what are the needs of the community and the citizens as we move forward in the city, and if we can work around real live use cases, and if we keep in mind for the sake of what, not technology, but what is the...
So it goes back to that outcome-based thinking. It's
Very
just like
much so.
If we all buy into that outcome, and that becomes the anchor, now you can... The technology is an enabler to the outcome, but everybody is signed off on that.
Yeah.
You know, are we as an industry, and maybe the cities are an actor in this as well, are we being articulate enough in saying what the outcome?
No, we're not. And that's why I would keep asking that question. I could do a smart city demonstration pilot every week or program every week in a city. We're being very select. We're not a huge company, and so we're being very select in where we do those programs. We have about 13 of them going on in North America right now. We start with the question of what for the sake of what? What are we trying to achieve? Oftentimes you're going to hear things like economic. We're trying to have economic growth. So when you look at the work we've done in Charlotte, a lot of that is around, we want to have a vibrant, growing community that's economically stable. Sometimes it expresses itself as sustainability. We've got a sustainability play here. Now in Charlotte, they had a play that said we want to be economically vibrant city that attracts new companies and it attracts young people as they graduate from school. But they also had a pillar that said it was around sustainability, and we want to reduce carbon footprints, we want to lose less water, we want to be more water efficient. And once you can kind of define those goals, then you can start to solve the problem. And then I think the community leaders will start to think about it differently. You asked the question, are we really beginning to think about it differently? I would say most places, no. They're still locked up in technology. A lot of that driven by the vendor community. But if we can start to think about what is the journey, because I believe the smart city is a journey over the next 10 or 20 years. So I've been fortunate enough to be on the forefront of this at Itron. I've been working on smart city stuff for 4 years now. When I first started doing it, I thought, maybe I'm being put in the penalty box here. I mean, why do I have to go work on smart cities stuff that Philip was very interested in? As it turns out, it's a great area to spend time in, but it is a journey, and it's going to go way beyond my career at Itron. But for the sake of what for me is, I want to do this for my kids, my grandkids, and I think we kind of owe it to that next generation to leave it in a better spot than it is today, the planet, that is.
And do you think that, you know, again, using a technology vernacular, and I've used this word in a piece I've written about, you know, smart cities needs a killer app, you know, because, you know, in explaining what we're in the industry, we have the time to discuss it and everything, but we also live in a soundbite world, you know,
right,
where there's the one thing. Do you not think that energy is the killer app? Because with the density of a smart city, you can have producers and off-takers like almost side by side. There was a thing in London. I'm going to use London because you can probably tell that's where I'm from.
I thought I detected that.
Where TfL just said that they're going to be an off-taker for any renewable generation within the city and so on. You know, so going back to the notion is like, do you think that this energy play is potentially the killer app?
Well, I do, and I know at Itron, obviously, you know, we're pretty deep, our roots are pretty deep in energy as well as water. I would say, I think energy clearly can be a killer app. I also would take it a step further and say this nexus between energy and water. And if we can go back again to for the sake of what, and if my pillar is about I want to be more efficient in my delivery of energy and I don't want to waste any, then I start to think about applying technology, like your example here in London. If I'm building a transportation system, and if my smart city play is all about this silo of transportation, I'm not going to think about this distributed energy over here. Likewise, if my pillar is all about just energy, I won't think about, well, perhaps there's a way to use this in transportation, or I wouldn't think about the impact on water by being more efficient with energy. So clearly, I think energy gives us an area we can all rally around. When I look at smart cities around the world, they typically have 7 to 8 different kinds of pillars, right? Energy, water, transportation, healthcare, mobility, waste, air. That's a lot to tackle. The city who says, I'm going to do all that on day one, we're going to run away from it. I look for somebody who's going to pick 2 to 3 or 4 maybe of those pillars.
Well, that's why you need some sort of roadmap thinking, to use a technology
Absolutely.
phrase, right? You can't do it all, because
Right.
just the capacity to manage
Yep.
all of those projects
Yep.
is, and this energy water nexus is interesting, because not many people know that within a city the energy to deliver water is probably accounts for the highest percentage of energy used
Absolutely.
within the city, right? So can you bring some of that to life about how you could potentially see that interplay, and with some of the sort of pilots and actual projects that you're doing, what have people found by looking at those two together?
Sure. Well, let's take Charlotte, for example. So in Charlotte, they had 4 pillars. One was around energy, one was water, waste, and environment. And if you look at those individually, you're going to deploy certain technologies. But when you start to look at the intersections of all of that, and in the case of Charlotte, they built a living laboratory in downtown. They automated and measured in 56 buildings in downtown Charlotte. And they started with the energy piece, and they started collecting data and sharing information with the citizens, the owners of the building, the occupants of the building, people who just came in and out of the building during the day. Just gave them lots of education, lots of information that could be available on a phone or a kiosk in terms of how we were using energy. But then they also started to relate, as we started to save energy, they started to relate that to, and that's a reduction in CO2. So by the way, a clean environment, which was one of their pillars. As we start to use water more, or energy more efficiently, look at the water we're saving over here, because it does take water to produce energy. So if we can save on energy, be more efficient, we save on the water side, and vice versa. And so I think you have to educate people on that. And once they see that, I think it's in everybody's heart that we want to be more efficient, we want to be more reliable, but it gets back to that for sake of what, right? And if we can connect energy and water, you just had a great example with the subway system. There are examples where we're going to be putting in microgrids to reduce energy over here, and in doing that, we're reducing carbon footprints, which is the water. There are situations where we're doing things with transportation, taking people off the street, taking them out of cars, and this all begins to connect and tie together. The reason I think energy can be one of the key pillars, the killer app, as you say, is it's got a lot of attention. You can relate it to CO2, and you can relate it to climate change, and I think it's something that you don't have to incent people. You don't have to pay them money to use less if we can put it in the proper context, because we all want to leave a better planet for our children and our grandchildren.
And it's also one of those things. I mean, going back to what you were saying earlier on, is this unified technology piece that can then balance a system like this. Because when you move from a command and control to a distributed system that is constantly adjusting itself, and I can also see whereby joining these two up, a lot of people talk about demand response, right? Mm-hmm. Very hard to do demand response if you want households to do it. But if you can join, Thames Water in London, huge pressurized things. Yep. It takes a lot of energy to pressurize these things. Yep. But if you can say, hey, listen, can you guys drop by a few bars because we've got a bit of an issue there? You've got an immediate sink
Yep.
that can join together. But the point I'm coming to is, how easy is it to join this up if the will is there? I mean, are we now at a technology nexus where actually we can do this?
Yeah, I'm really confident in saying that the technology is there today. This is not a technology issue. The networks, we think we've built, the world's finest open-way Riva network, and it's got tremendous capability. Truth is, technology exists. That's not unique to Itron. And if we can collect all that data and bring it to the top end with the tools available and things like we use Microsoft and Azure, that just the tools that are available today can make us gives us all kinds of capability to do analytics and analyze data and learn things, have insights that we never even thought about in the past. And because today's technology is all open and standards-based and interoperable, we can introduce to the equation a whole new ecosystem of partners, local universities. So we move around to smart cities projects that we're working on in like Spokane, Washington, or in Charlotte again. Local universities get involved, and these kids who do hackathons and stay up all night creating interesting applications. We gave an award this morning on Ignite Innovation here at the show, and it was all around taking outage information that the utility gets today and shaping that into an app to deliver that to local citizens and allow the citizens to interact and add more input. And all of a sudden you had an application in the hand of a user that looks more like today's Waze, how you can track your traffic, or interacts more like Uber. It's the world that the younger generation lives in, constant, immediate information.
And you want that information in an easy-to-use manner.
You do. And you know what? Old guys like me don't look at the problem the same way they do. So if I would have been handed that problem, I would have come up with a completely different kind of solution. So opening up the ecosystem and having lots of participation, big companies, small companies, local companies, global companies, getting universities involved, it really does, it makes the smart system, the smart cities opportunity just rich.
But that's another thing that I'm finding a lot about when we're talking about the smart city conversation. I mean, okay, look, there's been huge amounts, there's now an ISO standard for measuring your city and so on, and that causes some gamification between mayors of cities, especially some of our rock star mayors.
Yep.
But also the most important thing is this notion of open data, and then letting people innovate off the top of that. I mean, so how important has been the change of thinking about moving things into the cloud to enable that?
Well, it's critical. I mean, one of the foundations. So I said it's not technology; it's determining for the sake of what. The other critical thing I would say is you got to engage in a community that's full of leaders that are committed and have a vision of what they want for the community. And not just the local officials that are elected, like the mayor and the city council. Those are obviously important, but they also turn over every 3 or 4, 10 years. And I just mentioned it's a journey, right? It's 10 to 20 years. So you have to have local community companies involved too. So like in Charlotte, it's pretty important they have like Wells Fargo, and Bank of America, and Duke Energy. They have this leadership coming from the local companies and universities as well that's all committed towards this vision and this future. And I think that's been just a critical success factor.
And sort of as we come into the end of the time, I'd like to just stay on that point a little bit, because I've been looking at this as well. And was it about 2 years ago that there was a launch of the Res 100? These are companies that signed up to be renewable.
Right.
And they were shooting for 100, and it's now over 500 companies. I mean, how important is it that companies, which I'm particularly seeing that come out of the technology space, like the Googles of this world, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, who are all buying renewable generation, investing in it. It seems to me like that trend is a mega force behind all of this.
Well, I think that trend really helps. Make all of us look, how can I contribute to that? So I was just having a conversation with a gentleman who said, if you want to be a supplier to Apple, because Apple's made a huge commitment that all their data centers are going to be run off of renewable energy. If you want to be a supplier to Apple, you have to have a component of renewable energy be part of your portfolio. And so that forces companies to start. So now all of a sudden you have this pyramid effect, right? It really begins to spread out. And as more companies commit to that, and as more people like us get involved at our company, then pretty soon you start looking, what can I do when I leave the office tonight to contribute towards that? And of course, we're raising a generation of children and grandchildren that are getting raised to think that way, right? When I grew up in school, I learned about, recycling at school with the blue bins. It was only blue then. There's like 4 of them today. But, my grandchildren don't have to be taught that now at school because that's a way of life. But they are learning things about the climate and climate change, and they are learning things about, water, and they're much more in tune with, Dad, turn the sprinkler off, or don't leave the faucet running when you're brushing your teeth. So
yeah, they tell us off, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My grandchildren will tell me that. Yeah. So I think that corporate America committing to that has been very foundational as well. It really has kind of created this pyramid where we're all beginning to whatever your political beliefs be about this, we can all get behind. We should have a healthier planet, and we should be more efficient, and we should use less and waste less. I mean, there's so much opportunity if we just reduce waste. You don't even have to necessarily be more conservation minded, just reduce waste. And that's good for everybody. That's good for communities because they'll be more economically stable. That's good for us as individuals. We're going to live in a world that we want to live in. People will be attracted to our communities. New businesses will move there. And it is one of those things where the word sustainability seems to be taking on a whole different feel. Right.
It came from a place where it was almost felt like greenwash. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing a keynote speech by Justin Rose, who's the ex-Marks and Spencer CEO, and he said, look, we put in plan A only because I saw Al Gore talk, and I said, hang on a minute, sustainability can make business sense.
Right.
Right, and they've turned all of that around. And it's fascinating to me that it really seems to be, in the old world, the political leaders used to make the big move, but now these corporates have a whole different responsibility, don't they?
A lot of them talk about the double bottom line, right? It's not just EBITDA, but it's the contribution around sustainability. Every major corporation now creates a sustainability report every year about what I'm doing, and there are places where you can't sell product. There are utilities we can't even bid on programs, and cities we can't be involved in without showing proof of a program and real live data and real live progress towards sustainability. So I mean, it seems to not be this crazy wackos over here anymore. It's just a way of life. And as you said, it makes good business sense too, which changes the conversation.
And it becomes part of the DNA. And on that note, we'll leave it. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you very much
it.
for taking